Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of CANAPE Chats. This is a short series of videos that looks at the various activities done within the Creating a New Approach to Peatland Ecosystems project. I'm Harry Mack. I'm the project manager of the CANAPE project, and I've been joined today by Rudi Delvaux and Frederik Nees. Would you both like to introduce yourselves?
Okay, I'm Rudi Delvaux, and I work for Grenspark Kalmthoutse Heide, and my main task is nature conservation.
And my name is Frederik Naats. I work for Natuurpunt, and I'm the project manager to restore the knoll.
So Rudi, can you introduce us to the place we're talking about today?
Yeah, okay. The place is Grenspark Kalmthoutse Heide. It's situated between the border from the Netherlands and Belgium. It's about 6,000 hectares, so it's quite big. And there are several managers in the area, like Natuurmonumenten and Staatsbosbeheer on the Dutch side. And on the Flemish side, we have Agency for Nature and Forest and Nature Point. And Nature Point, which is also in this project, is situated in the northeast of the park. And also we have a lot of private owners who do also management in the area.
And is there anything what sort of area is it like? If we were new to the park, what would we be expecting to see?
See a lot of heathland, and the heathland is also surrounded by woodlands and some dunes. So we have several landscapes in the area. And the good thing is that you can also walk through the area with a lot of footpaths, so you can enjoy the area.
And I think if we move to our next slide, we'll see some of these areas and some of the special features of the park. So Frederik, you manage the site that we can now see from the air. Do you want to tell us a bit about it?
Of course, the knoll is one of the most beautiful sites of the Grenspark. Actually, the Grenspark is divided by a watershed. One part goes to the Scheldt River, the other part goes to the Meuse River, and it's the northwestern part that goes to the Meuse River. The groundwater comes to the knoll because it's the lowest part of the whole heathland landscape. Now, a heathland landscape is a perfect infiltration landscape because water can infiltrate very easily in the sandy soil. And actually, here on this aerial photo above, you can see a border between land dunes who were recently restored and the knoll itself. And that's the part where a lot of groundwater comes to the surface as seepage. That's a very wet part. And in these conditions, you can get development of boggy vegetations. In former days, the knoll was part of a very big bog that ran from Kalmthout to the big Dutch rivers. And now from this very big peat landscape, only some very small puzzles exist like the knoll. On the lower part, you can see a division between the nature area and farmland, and it's exactly on the border of the farmlands and the knoll. There is a drainage ditch, or there are several drainage ditches, and those ditches drain the groundwater, and therefore the quality of the knoll and its boggy vegetations is not good anymore.
And I think we'll see that if we go to our next slide, where we've got a more earth level picture of the knoll. I think you were telling me you can see that from these plants, they're not the species you would expect to look for in a bog.
No, so here you have pines, you have birches, and especially you have purple moorgrass, Molinia. This grass, it can thrive very well with fluctuating water levels. So what happens in the knoll in wintertime, lots of groundwater comes to there, also lots of rainwater, so we have high water levels. But in summer, due to the drainage ditches in the knoll, but also on the border side, lots of water gets drained, so the water levels they drop. Another reason for the domination of Molinia is nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen, and it's the combination of the nitrogen and the less favorite hydrology that makes that the knoll is quite dominated by Molinia. Now, we did already some small nature restoration measures, like here. we removed the upper organic layer. It's called sod cutting, and there you can already see a restoration of the boggy vegetations with some typical plants like sundew or bog asphodel.
Yeah. We can also see that sort of brought the water closer to the surface. I'm guessing with what you would like to do here is bring the water level up more generally.
Yeah. So at this location, it's just at the foot of the land dunes. So and these locations gets water all year because you have a very big landscape, a sandy landscape of the Kalmthoutse Heide, and under this very big sandy landscape, you have a very big groundwater, and it feeds the knoll. Now, these locations with water year-round, they are very small, only at the foot of these dunes. And we want to increase these locations. We want to increase the surface that these very wet locations occur. So boggy vegetations, especially with sphagnum mosses, can increase and can grow again in the knoll.
I think if we move on to the next slide, you can see much more clearly this division between these sand dunes and the knoll. So Frederik, do you want to talk a bit more about what you've been doing with the sand dunes up to now, how it plays into the landscape?
Before Interreg CANAPE, we also had a large life project called Life Helvik in the area. And with this life project, we removed the pine plantation to restore land dunes. So after we removed the pines, we removed also the upper organic layer with pine needles by sod cutting, and we open sand. And it's a combination of this open sand and an open area where wind can get much energy. That creates drifting sand. And at this location that we restored between 2015 and 2017, we again have drifting sand. And it's really nice to have a natural process like drifting sand back again in our area, because it's very rare in Belgium. The other advantage is by removing the pines that we also have a very that we have an increase of the infiltration there, so that big amounts of groundwater, local groundwater, go to the knoll. So that's another thing that we want to restore in the area next to drifting sand. We also want to restore the natural process of groundwater flows in the heathland landscape.
And what sort of species are supported in that area? I remember from when we visited, there's sort of vipers in the area, but are there any other particularly rare species that are helped out by this?
So this area we especially restored for some very special species like the grayling. It's a little butterfly for these sandy landscapes. In inland in Flanders, it's getting very rare, and there only occur some populations. The other populations died out, and that's why we created some additional open sand here. Other species are woodlark and European nightjar, who reacted very fast on our measures. On the longer term, when the heathland vegetation is also restoring at the borders of this drift sand, we can also expect vipers and smooth snakes here.
And if we move on to the next slide, we can see some of the plans you have for the boggy area, which is where you've been working under CANAPE. Do you want to talk us through what you're planning to do here over the next few months?
So in the knoll, we want to work on 2 levels. On the boundaries of the knoll and the farmlands, there is a drainage ditch, and there we can't dampen those ditches because the farmlands are still in use. And there we are going to place a foil screen, and the foil screen is placed into the soil just onto a clay layer that's under the knoll. So under the knoll you have at several depths you have clay layers who are impermeable for water flow, and by placing the foil just up to the clay layer on a vertical level, we can keep the water into the area. The second level we work on is internal, so there are also internal ditches, and those ditches we are going to dampen fully. It's important also when we dam these ditches that we also, because they were also in former days dug through the clay layer at certain locations, that we also restore the clay layer at these points, and the rest of the ditches, they will be filled up with sand. And that's also a very important measure to keep the groundwater in the knoll and to get these levels as close to the surface as possible. Finally, to prevent long-term flood of our protected vegetations, we also will place some weirs at very strategic locations to have an overflow when the water levels will be too high. The planning is that we will start with these works half August after the breeding season, and that the works will end at the end of October of 2022.
And what sort of changes in the long term are you expecting to see in the knoll as a result of the water level increase?
We expect to see that the water levels will not fluctuate so much, and that we can keep more water in the knoll. And it's very important because by doing this, we can create conditions for the growth of sphagnum mosses and other boggy species, and we can create conditions that Molinia can't be so dominant. So the dominance of Molinia will increase, and other species like the sphagnum mosses and typical bog species will increase. And we will also help these species. We already did it by small-scale sod cutting, but now we are also going to graze in the bog with cow, because they like to eat the Molinia very much, so we can create some light, and light is also very important for sphagnum species to grow. And already we have seen some good results last spring. So by doing the bog grazing, we've already seen good results. For example, last spring we have seen a huge increase of common cotton grass on these locations, also with sundew. So by the combination of working on the domination of Molinia by grazing and restoring the hydrology, we expect a good restoration of the bog vegetation.
And if we look at our next slide, we can also see that we're expecting quite significant savings in greenhouse gas emissions, with about a 40% reduction in emissions from the baseline in each year after the restoration, which obviously with the current ongoing hot weather in Europe, we're very aware of the need to get those emissions down as quickly as possible. And if we move on to our next slide, we can bring in Rudi to talk about some of the other activities that are going on in the Grenspark. So you can see here, we've moved from the knoll, which is in the northern edge of the park, over to the western edge, to the area surrounded by the blue circle. And if we jump to our next slide, we can go to Rudi to ask us why he's hanging out in a ditch on the western side of the park.
Okay, yeah. The area, it is called the Markgraaf, and there's a big ditch, like you see on the picture, which drains all the grasslands there. So the area, the Markgraaf, is around 40 hectares big, and it was privately owned before. But now it's managed by Agency of Nature and Forest, I think.
If we jump to our next slide, we've got 3 maps, which Rudi can talk us through. So what's the first map showing us, Rudi, with the red outline?
On this map, you can see the outlines of the Markgraaf. It's only grasslands and woodland. You can see in the northern part that the grassland is drained to the Venloop to Stappersven. And in the southern part, all the water will be drained to the east, to the big ditch we saw before. Now, both parts are dominated by grassland use, but it's separated by higher wooded areas. And also in the western part, you see a high dune, which feeds the groundwater system in the grasslands on the other side.
So at the moment, this is a landscape that's had the water drained out of it.
Yeah.
What would it be like if it was in a more natural state?
Before, when it's a more natural state, it will be more wet. But the thing is, the previous owner has put a pump in the area to avoid that there will be flooding. But now we will try to keep the water in without that it floods the surrounded area. Because around the area at the west side, there are a lot of buildings. That's a municipality of Kalmthout. We have to prevent that.
So that presumably brings us on to the second map where you can see the Zwarte Beek and the other watercourses. What else is this map showing us?
Yeah, you can also see on that map some lines where we made some measurements, and we have a soil profile, and also to see the water level on those lines. So we have a good idea what's the water table under it. And then you see the big main drainage ditches which goes to the west and to the north and the west. Yeah.
And then on our third diagram, you've got the ditches, I presume, marked in purple, and then you've got these green and yellow lines.
Yeah.
Could you tell us what you're planning to do here with the measures?
So the main objective is, of course, to reduce the drainage and capturing the seepage. So, and we also want to restore the open water that you can see in blue. And at last, we will also try to make a combination with the rainwater plan of the municipality of Kalmthout. But what we have to do is stop the drainage, and we want to put some wires. And you see that we also want to fill up some ditches, and some we will leave open. A soil profile has been drawn at the locations where action will be placed. It's where the ponds will be, one in the south and one in the north. There are also 8 monitoring wells who are placed in that area to monitor the water table. On the grasslands, the regularly management is going on. It means mowing the grasslands once a year and also grazing with sheep. But that was done before also. There was also fencing around all that area, so all the fences are gone, so they are removed. And soon there will be the excavations, so the ponds will be made, and with the soil they will fill up the ditches. So that's the plan for now. And also in the wooded area, we have some prunus, American bird cherry and American oak, and they will be cut away.
Is that because they're non-native species?
They're non-native species for Belgium, yes. Yeah.
And in the long run, what sort of species are you hoping will return to the area that are currently absent?
Especially in the grasslands where the soil will be wetter, we want to see, of course, when the area will be more wet, maybe we'll see more curlew, because it's a threatened species at the moment in Flanders, and also some amphibians will come back. That's the big goal for us.
Apart from the species, are there any other benefits you're looking to get from this rewetting?
For example, to have a buffer in winter, so we can keep the water level higher, and then in summer you have a little bit more water. It's also the idea to keep the water level at the same time in winter and in summer, trying to anyway, and also to prevent flooding in the area.
Okay, so thank you both for your time and joining me.